At the will reading, my billionaire grandfather left everyone millions of dollars. I only got 50. Not 50,000, not a symbolic check. Just two crisp bills slid across the table like an afterthought. My father smiled. The kind of smile that says, I always knew it. My brother laughed, not even trying to hide it. Someone muttered, figures. I said nothing. I just stared at the money in my hands, feeling the room close in around me. Because my grandfather had never been careless. Not with business. Not with people. And this felt deliberate. When I tilted the bills under the harsh office light, I noticed something strange. A tiny mark. Almost invisible. Almost nothing. But my grandfather had once told me, if you want to hide the truth, put it where no one bothers to look. An hour later, I stood inside a quiet bank office, sliding those $50 across the desk. The manager looked down at the money. And then, he froze. My name is Hazel. And in my family, I was never the one people expected much from. Not because I was irresponsible, not because I was a failure, but because I was quiet. While my brother Ethan learned early how to talk loud, take space, and turn every conversation into an opportunity, I learned how to sit back and observe. While my parents praised his ambition, his confidence, his future, they described me with softer words. Hazel is sweet. Hazel is easy. Hazel doesn't ask for much. What they really meant was, Hazel won't cause trouble. My grandfather, William, was the only one who seemed to notice the difference. To the world, he was a billionaire. A man who built an empire from almost nothing. People straightened their backs when he entered a room. Bankers laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Politicians returned his calls within minutes. But to me, he was just Grandpa Will, the man who drank his coffee black. Who hated unnecessary noise. Who believed silence told you more about a person than words ever could. When his health started failing, the family suddenly became very busy. Everyone visited, just not for long. My father would stop by in a tailored suit, check his watch twice, and say, Dad, I just wanted to see how you're doing. I've got a meeting. My mother brought flowers that stayed untouched in a vase. Ethan came once, stood near the door, and said, Hang in there, Grandpa. You're strong. Then they left. And the room always felt emptier afterward. I stayed. Not because I thought it would earn me anything. Not because I was hoping for gratitude. I stayed because someone had to. I adjusted his pillows when his breathing became shallow. I read the newspaper out loud when his eyesight weakened. I listened to the same stories over and over again without correcting him, even when I already knew the ending. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered weakly through the hospital blinds, he reached out and held my hand. His grip was fragile, but intentional. Hear that? He asked softly. Hear what? I whispered. The quiet, he said. Most people are afraid of it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if he were memorizing my face. You're not afraid, he continued. That's why you're still here. I swallowed hard. Of course I am. He smiled faintly. No, you're afraid of being invisible. That's different. I didn't know what to say to that. Another time, late at night, when the machines hummed steadily and the world felt far away, he said something that stuck with me. Money doesn't show who people are, he murmured. It just removes the mask faster. I laughed softly. You sound like you're planning something. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Maybe I am, he replied. I thought it was just the medication talking. I didn't know he was already deciding who I was going to become. When he passed, he did it quietly. No dramatic last words. No long goodbyes. Just a slow release of my hand. And then nothing. I remember standing there afterward, unable to move, thinking one single thought over and over again. Now I really am alone. Because the one person who saw me, who never needed me to be louder, sharper, or different, was gone. And I had no idea that even in death, my grandfather was still watching. The funeral was exactly what my grandfather would have wanted. Simple, controlled, no unnecessary speeches. Black suits filled the small chapel, polished shoes lined neatly along the aisle, white flowers arranged with surgical precision. Everything looked expensive, everything looked respectful, and somehow none of it felt real. I stood near the back, hands folded tightly in front of me, watching my family interact like actors who had rehearsed their roles too well. My father spoke in a low, steady voice, shaking hands, nodding solemnly. My mother dabbed her eyes at carefully chosen moments. Ethan moved through the crowd with confidence, accepting condolences as if they belonged to him. No one stood beside me. No one asked if I was okay. They didn't need to. In this family, that question was never asked unless there was something to gain from the answer. I overheard whispers drifting through the room, soft but sharp. So, how much do you think he left? I heard the real estate alone is worth a fortune. Ethan's probably set for life. Each sentence landed like a small, quiet cut. I told myself not to listen. I told myself this wasn't the time. But grief makes you sensitive in ways you don't expect. Every word felt louder, every glance heavier. At one point, I caught my father's eye from across the room. For a second, I thought he might come over. Say something. Anything. Instead, he gave me a short nod and turned back to a conversation about logistics. "Lawyer will contact us next week," he said to someone beside him. "We'll handle the details." We. As if I wasn't standing right there. After the service, people began to leave quickly. There were no lingering embraces, no shared memories exchanged with warmth, just polite goodbyes and plans already forming for what came next. Money has a way of doing that. It pulls people forward, never letting them stay too long in the past. At the cemetery, while the coffin was lowered into the ground, I felt something inside me break open. This was it. The end of the one relationship in my life that had never felt conditional. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand that someone notice how unfair this felt. Instead, I stood there in silence, because silence was what I had always been good at. Later that evening, I was the one who returned to my grandfather's old house. Not my parents. Not Ethan. Me. The place smelled faintly of dust and old books. I moved slowly from room to room, touching familiar objects like they might disappear if I didn't. His watch on the dresser. The chair by the window where he used to sit in the afternoons. The desk where he kept his handwritten notes, numbers scribbled in tight, deliberate lines. I sat down in that chair and finally allowed myself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to let the ache breathe. A few days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Thick paper, formal lettering, reading of the last will and testament of William Carter. The address was a law office downtown. The date was circled neatly in blue ink. My hands trembled as I held it. I didn't expect much. I had trained myself not to. Still, a small, dangerous thought crept in before I could stop it. Maybe he remembered. I folded the letter carefully and set it down, unaware that by the time I walked into that office, everything I believed about my place in that family was about to be tested publicly. The law office was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, in feeling. Polished wood, frosted glass, leather chairs arranged with perfect symmetry, like the room itself was reminding us who belonged and who didn't. I arrived a few minutes early and took the seat farthest from the head of the table, instinctively making myself small. One by one, my family filed in. My father, Richard, walked straight to the front and sat down as if the seat had been waiting for him. My mother followed, lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan came in last, relaxed, confident, already smiling like he knew how this would end. No one greeted me. No one asked how I was holding up. The lawyer, Daniel Ross, cleared his throat and opened the folder in front of him. "We are here to read the last will and testament of William Carter," he said calmly. My heart began to pound. The first name was my father's. "Richard Carter," Daniel read. "A total inheritance of $5 million. My father leaned back in his chair, satisfaction flickering across his face before he masked it with a solemn nod. My mother received $3 million. She let out a breath she'd been holding and reached for my father's hand. Then Ethan, $2 million. He didn't even try to hide his grin. He glanced in my direction, raised his eyebrows and mouthed, "Told you." I stared down at my hands. "Don't expect anything," I reminded myself. "You knew this." Daniel paused, turning the page. "And Hazel Carter." The room went quiet. "For Hazel Carter, the sum of $50. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. 50. Not 50,000. Not a token gesture paired with some sentimental object. Just 50. A laugh broke the silence. Ethan's. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "That's poetic." Someone else chuckled. I didn't look up to see who. My father smiled, not cruelly, Not openly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose long-held belief had just been confirmed. "This proves something," he said lightly. Dad knew who was practical and who wasn't. My mother avoided my eyes entirely. I felt heat rise to my face, then drain away, leaving something cold and hollow behind. I waited for the lawyer to say more, some explanation, some letter, some final message. But Daniel simply slid 2 bills across the table toward me. "Please sign here," he said, his tone neutral, professional. I picked up the money. It felt heavier than it should have. The room buzzed softly around me, whispers, shifting chairs, the quiet relief of people who had gotten exactly what they came for. No one spoke to me. No one asked if I was okay. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just stared at the bills in my hands, because my grandfather had never been careless. And when I tilted the money slightly under the overhead light, I saw it, a tiny mark, so faint it could have been a mistake. Except I knew better. I folded the bills carefully, slipped them into my purse, and stood up. "I think we're done here," I said quietly. No one stopped me. As I walked out of the office, I heard Ethan laugh again behind me. But for the first time, something inside me wasn't breaking. It was waking up. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car in the parking garage beneath the law office, engine off, hands still wrapped tightly around my purse. My reflection stared back at me from the windshield, pale, tense, but strangely focused. $50. I pulled the bills out again, smoothing them carefully on my lap. Most people would have shoved them into a wallet and forgotten about them, or torn them up in anger, or laughed it off pretending it didn't hurt. But my grandfather had taught me to look closer. "Details," he used to say, tapping the side of his notebook. "That's where the truth hides." It was unsettling. I tilted the bills under the dim garage light. There it was again. A tiny line, almost like a scratch, near the serial number. Not random, not accidental. One mark on the first bill, another on the second. My pulse quickened. I checked the numbers. On one bill, 3 digits were faintly underlined. On the other, 2 more positioned so precisely they had to mean something. This wasn't a stain. It wasn't wear and tear. Someone had done this on purpose. He did this, I thought suddenly. The idea sent a shiver through me. My grandfather had always been meticulous. He hated leaving things unfinished, hated loose ends. If he wanted to leave me nothing, he wouldn't have bothered with $50 at all. Unless the money wasn't the inheritance. Unless it was the key. I drove across town without really thinking about it, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The address came to me instinctively, pulled from memory like a long-buried file. The old bank. The one my grandfather had used for decades. The one he trusted when he trusted no one else. The lobby was quiet when I walked in. Marble floors, soft lighting, the smell of paper and polish. It felt like stepping into a different world, one where voices stayed low and secrets stayed buried. I approached the front desk, my heart pounding. "I need to speak with the branch manager," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about my grandfather, William Carter." The receptionist's expression changed instantly. "One moment, please." A few minutes later, I was led into a private office. The man behind the desk stood as I entered. Gray hair, sharp eyes, calm, professional posture. "I'm Mr. Thompson," he said. "How can I help you, Miss Carter?" I didn't waste time. I placed the 2 bills on his desk and slid them toward him. "These were left to me in my grandfather's will," I said. "And I think he marked them." Mr. Thompson frowned slightly, then picked up the money. At first, he looked bored, polite, indulgent. Then his eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, turned the bills, checked the serial numbers, and then he stopped moving. The color drained from his face so quickly it startled me. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice suddenly careful. "You already know," I replied. "From William Carter." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up, walked to the door, and quietly locked it. Then he returned to his chair and looked at me with something I hadn't expected. Respect. "These markings," he said slowly, "are not a coincidence." My breath caught. "They're a verification sequence," he continued. "And if I'm right, you're the only person who could have brought them here." I felt dizzy. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Mr. Thompson folded his hands on the desk. "It means," he said. Your grandfather left something outside the will, something no one else was meant to touch. The room felt suddenly too small. And the money? I asked. He glanced at the bills one more time. The money, he said quietly, was just the invitation. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. If you want to hide the truth, put it where no one bothers to look. And for the first time since the will reading, I understood. The real inheritance hadn't been announced in that cold office. It had been placed directly into my hands. Mr. Thompson didn't rush me. He sat back in his chair, studying my face the way someone does when they're deciding how much truth another person can handle at once. Before we go any further, he said carefully, I need to confirm your identity. I nodded, hands trembling slightly as I handed over my ID. He examined it, typed something into his computer, then paused when the screen responded. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's exactly as he said, he murmured. As who said? I asked. Your grandfather. My heart began to race. Mr. Thompson stood and walked toward a large steel cabinet set into the wall behind him. He opened it with a key, then another code, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before but not often. There's a private deposit box here, he explained, registered solely to William Carter. It exists outside the will, outside probate, completely separate. My throat went dry. Why wasn't anyone else told about it? He looked at me then, his gaze steady. Because your grandfather instructed us not to tell anyone, he said, unless they came with proof. He placed the 2 bills beside a document on his desk. These markings, he continued, are part of a verification system he designed himself. He believed numbers tell the truth if you know how to read them. That sounded exactly like him. I followed Mr. Thompson down a quiet corridor, the air growing cooler with every step. We stopped in front of a heavy door, and he entered a code I didn't recognize. The door opened with a soft click. Inside was a small room lined with secure boxes. He unlocked one and slid it open. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Neatly arranged gold bars reflected the light. Folders labeled with company names I recognized instantly. Investment documents, bonds, accounts. I felt my knees weaken. This, I whispered. This is approximately $32 million, Mr. Thompson finished calmly. Conservatively, I covered my mouth, tears blurring my vision. But it wasn't the money that made my chest ache. It was the envelope resting on top of everything else, plain, cream-colored, my name written in my grandfather's familiar handwriting, Hazel. My hands shook as I picked it up. He left that specifically for you, Mr. Thompson said softly. We were instructed not to open it, ever. I nodded, barely able to breathe. We returned to the office, and once I was seated, I finally opened the envelope. The paper inside was folded carefully, as if he'd taken his time, as if he knew I would. My dear Hazel, if you're reading this, it means you saw what others didn't. That already tells me I was right. Tears slid down my cheeks before I could stop them. I gave you $50, not because that's what you deserved, but because I needed you to see the truth with your own eyes. Money doesn't change people. It only removes the excuses. I could hear his voice in my head, calm and certain. I wanted you to watch who smiled, who laughed, who stayed silent when you were diminished. Those reactions matter more than any speech at a funeral. My chest tightened painfully. You were the only one who stayed when there was nothing to gain. You didn't ask. You didn't push. You didn't perform. That is why I trust you. I pressed the letter to my chest, my shoulders shaking. He had seen everything. The money in that box is not a reward. It is a responsibility. Protect yourself with it. Build a life that doesn't require you to beg for respect. And when they come, and they will remember this. Love that depends on money was never love to begin with. I wiped my eyes and read the final line. Don't make yourself small again. Grandpa. The silence that followed felt sacred. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat gently. Your grandfather also left legal instructions, he said. If you choose to proceed, we can establish a trust immediately. Anonymous, protected. No one can touch it without your consent. I took a deep breath. Outside that office, my family was probably celebrating, counting, planning. They thought the story had already ended. But as I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was the moment everything truly began. And the next time my family looked at me, they wouldn't be seeing the quiet one anymore. They didn't give me much time. 3 days. That's all it took for the truth to leak. I was still processing everything, still replaying my grandfather's letter in my head, when my phone started ringing nonstop. Calls I ignored. Messages I didn't open. Missed voicemails stacking up like warning signs. I knew who it was. I just didn't expect them to show up in person. It was early evening when the knock came. Not polite, not hesitant, sharp and impatient, like the door owed them something. I looked through the peephole. My father, my mother, and Ethan, all standing there with practiced expressions, concern mixed with expectation. I took a slow breath and opened the door. "Hazel," my mother said immediately, stepping forward. "We need to talk." They walked in without waiting for an invitation. My father glanced around my apartment, eyes scanning the furniture, the shelves, the quiet space like he was searching for proof. "You kept this place very modest," he said. "Interesting." I said nothing. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smirking. "Guess Grandpa didn't think you needed upgrades, huh?" I finally spoke. "Why are you here?" My father didn't hesitate. "We know about the account," he said flatly. "The one you didn't mention." The air tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied calmly. He scoffed. "Don't insult us. Someone at the bank talked. We know it's over 30 million. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Honey," she said softly, "this doesn't have to be ugly. We're family." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, family. That thing you forgot about the second you got rich." Something snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. "You laughed at me," I said. "At the will reading. Do you remember that?" Silence. I continued, my voice steady but sharp. "When I was handed $50, did any of you stand up for me? Did anyone say it was unfair?" My father frowned. "That's not the point." "It is," I said. "It's exactly the point." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Fine. So what? Grandpa had his reasons. He always favored you anyway." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Hazel, please. You know your brother has plans, investments. This money could help all of us." "There it is," I said quietly. My father's tone hardened. "We're not asking. We're telling you to do the right thing. Split it. Keep the peace." I felt my hands shake, but I didn't let it show. "The right thing," I repeated. "According to who?" "According to blood," he snapped. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "According to the law," I said, placing it on the table. They froze. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "My grandfather's legal instructions," I replied. "The ones you didn't know about." I opened the folder and slid the documents toward them. "This account is held in trust," I continued. "Separate from the will. Fully legal. Fully protected." My father's face darkened. "You planned this." "No," I said. "He did." My mother whispered. "Hazel, don't do this." I met her eyes. "I'm not doing anything. I'm honoring his wishes." Ethan's voice turned sharp. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I answered. "I think I'm done being smaller." My father straightened. "If you don't share, we'll challenge it." I nodded once. "You can try," I said. "But there's a clause in the will. Any legal dispute voids your inheritance." The room went still. Ethan's smirk vanished. "That's a bluff." "It was read out loud," I said. "You were there." My father clenched his jaw. My mother looked between us, panicked. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I already am," I replied. They stood there for a long moment, realizing they'd miscalculated. Finally, my father turned toward the door. "You'll regret this," he said. "Maybe." But as the door closed behind them, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was standing my ground. And I knew without a doubt, this was the moment my grandfather had been preparing me for all along. The silence after they left didn't end that night. It spread. At first, it was subtle. My phone stopped ringing. Group chats disappeared. Invitations I never expected suddenly felt noticeable by their absence. I was removed from the family calendar without a word. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. No messages. No explanations. Just quiet. I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Some nights, I sat alone on my couch, staring at my phone, wondering if I had gone too far, if I had been too harsh, if choosing myself had meant choosing loneliness. Because no one really talks about that part. They tell you to set boundaries. They tell you to protect your peace. They don't tell you how empty it can feel at first. My parents didn't call. Ethan blocked me on social media. I found out by accident when I tried to check his profile and it simply wasn't there anymore. I stared at the blank screen longer than I should have. So, this was it. I had finally said no, and this was the price. I focused on work, on routine, on keeping my life intentionally small and quiet, just the way my grandfather had lived despite everything he owned. I didn't buy a bigger place. I didn't change my lifestyle. I didn't post anything online. The money stayed exactly where it was protected, untouched, invisible. Because the truth was, money had never been the thing I wanted. What I wanted was safety. Weeks later, I stood in a courthouse hallway, signing documents to finalize the trust. The lawyer explained everything carefully, emphasizing words like protection, consent, control. "This ensures no one can pressure you," she said gently. "Not now, not later." I nodded. Pressure had defined my entire upbringing. This was the first time I felt free from it. Life moved forward in small, quiet ways. I met Lily a year later. She was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, tiny and red-faced and perfect. When the nurse placed her in my arms, something inside me rearranged itself completely. I looked down at her and made a promise I didn't say out loud. "You will never have to earn love by shrinking yourself." My parents didn't come to the hospital. They didn't send flowers. They didn't ask. And surprisingly, that no longer shattered me, because as I watched Lily sleep against my chest, her small fingers curled around mine, I understood something my grandfather had known all along. Family isn't defined by who shows up when there's money on the table. It's defined by who stays when there's nothing to gain. Still, sometimes late at night, when the world was quiet, I wondered if this distance was permanent, if the door I had closed would ever open again. I didn't chase the answer. I had learned that peace doesn't come from fixing people who don't want to change. It comes from choosing a different future, and I was finally ready to build one, even if I had to do it without them. Life didn't change overnight. There was no dramatic victory scene, no apology tour, no sudden realization from my family. What changed was quieter than that. Safer. I moved slowly, intentionally. I worked with lawyers and advisors who answered to me and only me. The trust my grandfather had prepared became a wall I didn't have to explain, justify, or defend. For the first time, no one could corner me with guilt. No one could threaten me with family. No one could make me smaller for their comfort. And I didn't feel powerful, I felt protected. As Lily grew, I built a life the way my grandfather had taught me, simple on the surface, strong at the core. I invested carefully. I set aside a future for her education. I donated quietly to causes that supported women who needed legal protection, women who were told, "That's just how family is," because I knew how dangerous that sentence could be. Sometimes, people ask if I regret it. If I regret not sharing. If I regret walking away. If I regret being labeled cold or selfish. I don't, because regret comes from acting against your own truth. And for once, I hadn't. My grandfather didn't leave me $50. He didn't even leave me millions. He left me clarity. He showed me who would laugh when I was humiliated, who would stay silent, who would only reach for me when they needed something. And more importantly, he showed me who I was when I finally stopped asking for permission to exist. The last thing he gave me wasn't money. It was the courage to say no, the strength to stand alone, and the freedom to build a family that would never confuse love with control. When I look at Lily now, laughing without fear, growing without conditions, I understand the true inheritance. Not wealth, not revenge, not validation, peace. And that was worth more than every dollar he left behind.